Morning, everybody. Excellencies, distinguished panelists, colleagues, online, and especially welcome to So a warm welcome to this side event on the digitalization of child's right to identity, a tool for inclusion or exclusion. It's an honor to moderate this session with the margins of the Human Rights Council, where the promising perils of digitalization for children are next to us, firmly on the agenda. So we all know that birth registration is a fundamental human right under the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the International Covenant on Civil Rights. Recognition of the child's existence and establishes legal identity, opens the door to all main other rights, including nationality, education, health, social security, and all forms of protection. As we know, there are hundreds of more than 100 million children who are strengthen the accuracy of records and helps states reach children in remote or crisis areas. At the same time, it cannot alone be the solution that ensures every child's right to identity. Children living in poverty, remote rural areas, informal settlements, and without stable connectivity are the least likely to benefit from digital services. So international human rights law does offer a framework for using and regulating digital technologies, including the rights to privacy, non-discrimination, participation, freedom of expression, access to information, and accountability. But applying this framework means ensuring that digital identity systems do not become tools of surveillance or discrimination, and that data are used and collected responsibly. And that also, from a child rights perspective, that children understand and their families can influence the decisions that regard their personal information. So our discussion today draws on important recent work, and the panelists will review and discuss regional guidance on the digitalization of registration, global policy analysis for birth registration, and digitalization in other regions. And we will explore several questions. What is digitalization for inclusive identity within the wider digital public infrastructure? How digitalization may lead to exclusion of certain groups? What practices appear most promising? And so on. Let me quickly outline how we will work together in this hybrid space. We have panelists here and also online, so I'll ask you to be mindful of when engaging in conversation and asking questions. We want this to be safe, friendly, and empowering environment. If you can, please use clear, non-technical language. It's our shared responsibility to keep the children online safe and ensure that participation is meaningful and inclusive. So we ask not to take videos or screenshots online, especially of children, because we don't have consent. If you're joining remotely and have a safeguard or concern, you can to someone online. This event, I think, is being recorded, which is good. And while the chat function, I understand, is disabled, you can still submit questions at any time through the Q&A button. Time permitting, I will make sure that they can be answered towards the end of the session. So with these objectives and ground rules in mind, I invite you to engage fully especially listen very carefully and to help us think through how digitalization can truly serve every child's right to identity. And with that, I'm very honored to give the floor to the permanent representative of Mexico to the UN in Geneva, Ms. Francesca Mendez. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Philippe, and dear panelists, Oscar, Ellen, Sabrina, Mia, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues and friends, dear audience online. Good morning, everybody. Well, it's an honor for Mexico to participate in this important event alongside our partners, OHCHR, UNICEF, the Council of Europe, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of Child Identity Protection, and ATD for the world. Thank you for bringing this important event. The right to identity is an enabler of other rights. And birth registration is the official means of recording a child's existence and establishing a legal identity. The international community has committed to providing legal identity for all, including birth registration, in accordance with Target 16.9 of the 2030 Agenda. However, despite efforts to increase the global rate of birth registration, over 200 million children worldwide still lack a birth certificate. Without legal recognition, a child has no name, no nationality, cannot prove their age, and may face challenges in enjoying their human rights, such as the right of education, health, work, political participation, and others. Children without a birth certificate are invisible before the law and are more vulnerable to discrimination, statelessness, illegal adoption, child, early and forced marriage, and other harmful practices. It is with this reality in mind that Mexico, together with Turkey, has presented since 2012 a recurrent resolution at the UN Human Rights Council on birth registration and the right of everyone to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. This resolution has been the only resolution at the Council addressing this vital issue. Its latest iteration in 2023, Birth Registration Resolution 52/25, mandates OHCHR to prepare a report on the use of digital technologies to achieve universal birth registration. We are pleased that we'll hear today directly from OHCHR about the highlights of this report. During the current Human Rights Council session, we plan to present the birth registration resolution once again to the Council. The draft, to be circulated publicly in the coming days, will include updates such as, first, digitalization, acknowledging both the opportunities and potential risks of emerging technologies. When designed with the necessary human rights safeguards, digital technologies have the potential to facilitate and improve birth registration, making it more accessible and efficient. Second, access to registration for children in vulnerable situations, for example, children living in poverty, rural and remote areas, or out-of-school children, through the use of innovative and inclusive technologies. Third, the provision of remedies and full reparation to any person whose human rights are violated as a result of the lack of birth registration or certificate. The draft will also seek to maintain the standards of the 2023 version. In this regard, it will emphasize the fundamental rights of everyone to be recognized everywhere as a person before the law, as well as the obligation of states to register all children immediately after birth without discrimination of any kind, which is a critical step toward the full realization of their human rights. Beyond the Human Rights Council resolution, at our national level, the Constitution of Mexico establishes that every person has the right to identify and to be registered immediately after birth. Over the years, birth registration brigades in Mexico have reached rural and remote areas, bringing registration closer to families who need it most, particularly in municipalities where more than 50% of the population is indigenous. Additionally, in partnership with UNICEF, Mexico has improved the civil registry system based on individuals, a digital system that allows for the immediate registration of any child in remote areas, even in areas without internet access. This system is supported by portable kits equipped with technology and connectivity tools to register births and use birth certificates on the spot, ensuring access to the fundamental rights in rural and to rich areas. Mexico remains committed to this agenda and to working with all partners to ensure that every child's identity is preserved. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Excellency, and thank you for the lead you have taken with Turkey on this issue. And we hope there will be a lot more support from other states in your upcoming work, and also for the national practice that you outlined. It seems so efficacious. I will move now to my neighbor on the left, who's a colleague looking at rights treaty bodies, but also is the chairperson of the African Committee on Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, Ms. Sabrina Gohan. I think you're a psychologist also. That makes it even better. So that's relieving in this very uncertain times. So what are the highlights of the report that the committee has put out on digitalization of please.
Great honor as person of us child very important issue, the child's right to identity. Is it a tool for inclusion or exclusion? I will present several insights from the ASERO Committee of Experts, African Experts for Child on digitalization, the guidance note on digitalization of TRBA with a focus on birth registration in Africa. So, as my colleague said now, the birth registration is more than just a certificate. It's the first legal of child's existence, as we know, with this meaning, legal meaning, and also the psychological and psychosocial meaning. So it's fundamental human right, and the first step for the child in securing legal identity. So with birth registration, we have this gateway, this essential to essential services, the child's healthcare, education, social protection. So this is the main tool of governance for governance, and the main tool also for population data, for policy making, budgeting, and public investment. So child without certificate, without registration is this time is invisible, and the government keeping it in this invisible situation. Every child has a right of has his right from birth to a name to be registered immediately after birth and to be and to have his nationality. That's what is mentioned in the Article 6, paragraph 1 of the Charter, and it's also aligning with the aspiration of the committee concerning universal birth registration for every child. So the committee has elaborated on the rights and the correlation obligation of states in its general command number 2. Established and strengthened universal, functional and accessible civil registration system to ensure that every child's birth is registered and certificated. Ensuring also registration is free, immediate, and non-discriminatory, concerning this important principle. And ensure civil courts maintain their prerogative, so legal value, prevent fraud, and guarantee accessibility. In Africa, it's estimated that only 51% of children under 5 has been birth registered according to UNICEF 2023. So that means nearly half of them are remain invisible to registration. So what about digitalization? Digitalization for us is a solution to challenge of birth registration. And the committee called for inputs told the special rapporteur on trends, special rapporteur concerning this thematic, on trends, opportunities, and challenges in 2025. After that, we adopted these guidance on the digitalization of civil registration and vital statistics, with a focus on birth registration in Africa adopted in December 2025. So now we have a lot of countries, African countries, that are at various stages of adopting digital technology of birth registration, often transitioning from, of course, the first step manual, paper-based system to hybrid models or fully digitalization platforms. So we have Kenya, we have Nigeria. Kenya, for example, introduced a digital birth and death registration system in 2023. We have also South Africa, implement an online birth registration system in public hospital. Lesotho launched also a system of birth registration in 2023 and integrated in health facilities. Ethiopia, Uganda, Cameroon, Cameroon has their new law in 2024 supporting digitalization of TRBAs. So the common emerging trends were supported. So we have a lot of emerging technology and emerging system, blockchain of UNICEF supported parents using tablets in health facilities in Ethiopia, and mobile registration kits in Uganda and South Africa. Also centralized management, example, Nigeria National Population Commission or Kenya Civil Registration Services. We can also talk about this integration of the health system, such as UPA system, designate to make birth records and also reports. There are also specific advanced solutions that are currently experimental. Connected bracelets from newborns with QR codes, self-sovereign identity prototypes, and also African indigenous for birth detection and language transmission. About the opportunities and benefits, the main issue of this theme of today. We have improved coverage and accessibility, improved digital tools, especially mobile and remote registration units that can significantly improve coverage in hard-to-reach areas. also informal settlement and for refugees or stateless population. This reduces geographical distance and travel costs for parents, the main barriers in a lot of countries in Africa. The second point or the second issue concerns the efficient governance and planning. It concerns digital systems provide accurate, real-time, and disaggregated data on vital statistics. This data is crucial for development planning. Example, provision of social amenities, resource allocation, school capacities, teacher deployment, and disciplinary child rights policies. The third point concerns the reduced bureaucracy and cost. Digitalization promises faster, easier, and more convenient registration, reducing delays, error, and bureaucratic hurdles associated with manual paperwork. It also offers cost savings for both citizens and the state in the long run. And finally, child protection, of course, a secure digital report provides of age, which has prevent violation of child rights like child marriage, for example, but reality problem, big problem in Africa, and also trafficking also. So despite the benefit, digitalization faces and structural barriers that can exacerbate exclusion if not addressed intentionally. No digital have as challenges to increase no digital literacy and awareness among sector population, including rural communities, older caregivers, and marginalized groups. Legal and policy gaps, outdated legal framework often not fully support or recognize digital reports, electronic signatures, or cross-sectoral, and interoperability also, interoperability, legal ambiguous lack of clear data protection laws create uncertainty and identity implementation, and exclusion of marginalized group, unfortunately serving exclusion for vulnerable populations such as children with disabilities, those in nomadic communities, informal settlement, children of older caregivers, refugees, and stateless population in three situations. Data privacy and trust concerns, premature technological deployment, human resources and coordinations issues, and also what concerns the gender, rural urban economic, and digital devices. So, unfortunately, I have some recommendations. I will be for the conclusion. The key recommendation concern to adopt a whole of government approach, also a comprehensive legal policy reform, and infrastructure investment and accessibility through invest in expand digital infrastructure, expand mobile registration units, integrate birth registration into primary care and education system, and to raise awareness and training and community engagement, and for the state party, they must also have operational and management improvement. Thank you. Shukran. Obrigado. Merci.
Thank you very much for this all this information and for a panorama of some of the advancements on digitalization and registration. I'm going to quickly give the floor to Helen Griffiths, who was already referenced as the author or taking a report from the OHCHR. So we're very curious to hear and get some advance notice on its content. Please.
Thanks, Philip, and good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to join you today and to share the High Commissioner's report on the important position and registration for every child, as mandated as we heard by Resolution 52/25. Today, for the speaking time limits, I'm just going to focus on two key points of the report. One is the barriers to digitalization, which is so preventing universal birth registration, and then just setting out a little bit the child rights-based model to achieve it, that's set out in the report, and that's practically sustainably and for every child. So when we talk about the digitalization of birth registration, it does not in and of itself overcome the many barriers preventing universal birth registration. In fact, it may even create new ones. As states increasingly digitalize public infrastructure and create governance systems, 2.6 billion people, that's 1/3 of the world's population, remain offline today. So this digital divide is stark. There's 93% of internet access to high-income countries versus 27% in low-income countries. And connectivity is even lower in least developed countries and landlocked developing countries. And the digital divide is most pronounced in rural and remote areas, among people living in poverty, and in emergency settings. Civil registration and vital statistic systems move towards digitalization. Significant human rights challenges are emerging because these systems are being introduced without adequate safeguards. Extensive data collection raises concerns regarding a range of rights, especially the right to privacy, and regarding data protection. And if biometric data are involved, the harms may actually be irreparable. Interoperable government systems expand the risk of misuse, unauthorized access, and unlawful or arbitrary interference with privacy. And this includes tracking and monitoring without legal justification. And these concerns are also heightened by the potential for surveillance through mission creep and the absence of accountability for data use. Digitalization can also create new forms of exclusion. This is particularly relevant for groups in vulnerable situations who lack digital access or accuracy, or who are affected by discriminatory system design, modes of implementation, or pre-existing discriminatory laws and policies. And this results in targeted discrimination, exploitation, and ultimately exclusion from birth registration systems. What's the challenge of joint support, which is focused on isolated digital platforms or only on early implementation cases of digitalization? This can create what we call vendor lock-in. It creates dependence on specific technologies, and overall it can result in fragmentation into incompatible, unsustainable, or misaligned systems. And overall, the impact on birth registration is this undermines the coherent implementation of the system. It causes delays in issuing the documents needed, it increases the cost for clients, and it erodes trust in the system. Digital ID management systems that are not built on birth registration also risk creating parallel ID systems. This weakens birth registration and diverts resources away from universal coverage. And finally, digitalization can introduce additional steps and validation requirements that overwhelm individuals and create delays. And these are burdens that get passed on and most heavily on groups of vulnerable situations, further contributing to exclusion and slowing down access to essential documents. So what do we mean when we talk about a child rights-based model for universal birth registration? And here I'll try not to repeat too much what my colleague just said, but just to highlight, firstly, inclusivity. States should remove indirect and direct barriers that exclude children from birth registration in law, policy, and practice. Birth certificates should contain only essential information and should avoid sensitive details that could expose a child to discrimination, such as, for example, nationality or migration status. And all information should remain confidential. Second, accessibility and affordability. Birth registration and the birth certificate must be free of charge. All children, parents, and caregivers need direct access to certificates, services, and clear information about what the process is and how to go about it. Systems must be accessible both in person and digitally, and decentralized through mobile units, community centers, and local administrative points. The procedure should be simple. It should be available in relevant languages and designed to reach rural and marginalized communities. When you combine registration and certification into a single, easily accessible procedure, you can greatly expand coverage. So what we call a one-step, one-visit approach, in which you can declare, register, and receive the certificate altogether, is really effective. Thirdly, and we already heard this, a whole of government integrated systems approach. This is really essential to achieve universal birth registration. It requires effective governance. It requires multi-sectoral collaboration and clear and transparent data and information sharing. Civil registration should be linked with health, education, and social protection systems to create what we call a coherent life cycle approach, something that will follow a person throughout their life. And again, you need strong, effectively enforced legal frameworks that protect and advance human rights, including robust data protection safeguards for data sharing, and hopefully meaningful participation of individuals, including children, in the design, implementation, and evaluation of birth registration laws and policies. This will ensure that systems reflect living realities and reach all children and their families. And then I'll come to now human rights and digitalization. Digital technologies can play an important role in advancing birth registration. It improves the accuracy, timeliness, and permanence of records. It can help by reaching children and their families in remote areas through tools such as mobile communications. It is not an end in itself, but it should empower individuals to realize their right to registration. It simplify existing processes, strengthen integrated systems, and expand access through both in-person and digital channels. And as systems evolve, ongoing monitoring and evaluation are essential to ensure that digital approaches remain inclusive, effective, and sustainable. So how do we do this? I mean, a human rights framework must guide our digitalization efforts, and this includes the rights we've already talked a bit about today: privacy, non-discrimination and equality, participation, freedom of expression, access to information, and accountability. Digital birth registration systems must follow the principles of accessibility, availability, affordability, adaptability, and quality. And any restrictions on rights arising from data collection, processing, or sharing must meet the standards of legality, legitimacy, necessity, and proportionality. And states should conduct human rights due diligence, including regular human rights and child rights impact assessments when they digitalize our systems. In order to put trust in the systems, strong legal and policy frameworks with privacy and data protection are essential. They help to prevent unlawful or arbitrary surveillance, misuse of data, and discrimination. These frameworks must ensure that personal data are collected, processed, and stored securely, lawfully, with appropriate consent, and only for the necessary purposes and time. And that only the minimum data required to establish legal identity are used. And data privacy safeguards, transparency, independent oversight, and effective enforcement of data protection laws are central to creating what we call right-respecting digital systems, especially with digital biometric identity programs involved. These digital systems must complement and not undermine the existing streamlined processes. Successful implementation depends on simplifying and strengthening processes first, and ensuring this well-structured one-step approach that we talked about to registration certification. So overall, what we're calling for right now is a gradual and hybrid approach, adapted to each context. Digital systems may be more feasible in urban areas with strong infrastructure and universal accessibility, or paper-based systems should continue in rural and remote areas and in urban areas with universal and equal accessibility until digitalization can occur sustainably. And finally, digital birth registration efforts should be aligned with corporate e-governance strategies. It should be fully financed for both initial setup and long-term maintenance, and built on open source sustainable solutions. There are two final elements to what we call the child rights approach model that we set out in the report. One is developing emergency resilient systems. In crises, birth registration must continue. For example, flexible measures such as mobile units, simplified procedures, and where necessary, temporary handwritten certificates can ensure the continuity of registration and protect children's rights, even in these contexts. And finally, accountability of all stakeholders, governments, businesses, partners, and donors is essential to uphold children's rights in registration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, for summarizing as best you could everything that's in the report in just a few minutes. It's quite a challenge. So at this point, I think we're going over online to.
No, first
First is you.
No, it's best.
So
Okay.
sorry, you'll be next. So let's go over online to Bhaskar Mishra, who's at UNICEF, the child rights specialist, and we have a question for you. What are the 3 focus areas for digitalization, and why are they so important?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, so thank you for the opportunity. Let me start by emphasizing that digitalization of CRBS systems has been a game-changing enabler and an absolute necessity. Digitalization supports the whole continuum of services, from pre-birth demand creation and awareness, to notification and declaration, to validation, registration, and certification, right through to post-registration steps such as requesting extra copies, reporting errors, and making corrections. A whole range of interactions can become easier, faster, and more reliable when digital tools are used effectively. We have been advocating for safe, innovative, and cost-effective digitalization even before the Sustainable Development Goals, and this has been reinforced through UN Legal Identity Agenda and several Human Rights Council resolutions, including the 2030 resolution that led to the report Helen presented today. Having worked with Helen on this report and based on our close interactions with more than 80 countries, this feels like the right moment to take stock. What has worked, what has not, and what course corrections are needed if we want to truly optimize the power of digitalization in the remaining 58 months to 2030 and beyond. Digitalization alone cannot deliver a child's right to identity. Inclusive legal identity depends on many underlying factors and cannot be achieved through technology in isolation. This mindset of treating digitalization as a standalone fix still persists even among donors and implementing partners. And although countries are beginning to shift away from it, the transition has come at the cost of wasted resources and lost times. And this includes some countries that Honorable Sabrina Gerhard also mentioned. So the key is to understand the difference between what digitalization can do, what it actually does, and what it cannot do. When we factor in all three, our planning becomes more grounded. Let's look at some drivers of inclusive legal identity systems. First, digitalization must begin with a review of law and policies. Everybody highlighted this because civil registration is a legal process and certificates have evidentiary value. We urgently need to stop the implement now and legalize later practice. Second, to fully realize the benefits of digitalization, faster, simpler, more accessible, and more affordable services, we must first simplify and modernize outdated business processes. Systems built in the 1980s and 1990s cannot deliver in 2026. And adding new layers of steps in the name of digitalization that Helen also mentioned only deepens the one step forward, two steps back problem. Third, we also need to shift from people-centric to people-driven processes, as many human-centered design efforts have fallen short simply because systems were not built with people. Capturing the realities of marginalized and vulnerable groups is essential to addressing last-mile challenges. And very often, our focus is limited to improving access. We forget about the need for familiarity with digital systems for both clients and service providers. If users and service providers are not comfortable using a system, access alone will not solve the problem. Let's turn to how digitalization may lead to exclusion. Exclusion often results from design choices, even when intentions are good. Too often, systems are built around what works for administrators rather than what is practical for families. And there is an underlying assumption that everyone is online, literate, and comfortable using digital services. This equality of reach assumption is one of the most flawed starting points. Let me share a few practices that routinely create exclusion. Making parental ID mandatory for a child's registration, especially when national ID coverage is low, is one of the biggest barriers. If a mother lacks her own ID, her child is automatically denied registration, creating further exclusion down the line. This is not exclusion by circumstance, but exclusion by design. In many countries, national IDs are issued at age 18. This means young mothers aged 15 to 18 and their children are automatically excluded, affecting the whole family. In the absence of parental national IDs, particularly the mothers, unique ID numbers cannot be issued to newborns during birth registration. This has become a major challenge at a time when countries have realized the importance of issuing unique ID numbers during birth registration to link CRVS to national ID systems. In recent years, and partly because digitalization has enabled it, birth registration is increasingly being used to determine nationality. This moves far beyond the civil registrar's legal mandate and creates unnecessary barriers. Digitalization costs should never be shifted onto families, yet rising registration and certification fees in some countries violate basic human rights principles and ultimately deny the poorest children their very first proof of legal identity. When countries ignore limitations in electricity, connectivity, infrastructure, and staffing and rush to implement fully digital systems instead of practical hybrid models, they end up excluding exactly those they aim to prioritize: rural families, displaced communities, linguistic minorities, adolescent mothers, children with disabilities, and people in fragile or humanitarian settings. And finally, a disturbing trend is the misuse of CRBS data. Despite these records not being public, which erode trust as families fear their information may be used against them, and practices like issuing unique ID number only to citizens further violate the universality principle of CRBS system. Regarding promising practices and human rights-based approaches, Helen has enumerated quite a few. Let me highlight 6 short points. First, digitalization must uphold universality, inclusiveness, non-discrimination, and other human rights principles, and be responsive to the needs of vulnerable and marginalized groups. Second, antenatal care should be used to collect parental NIDs, with health workers sharing the names of parents without IDs with national ID authorities to give families several months to obtain their documents and prevent last mile bottlenecks during birth registration. 3. Flexible pathways for unique ID number generation are essential, ensuring alternatives to real-time issuance while keeping all identifiers properly aligned with national ID system to avoid duplication. Fourth, the health civil registration national ID pathway should be strengthened to boost coverage and sustain timely registration by enabling collect information once and use it multiple times and move information, not people. Strong safeguards must be upheld to protect privacy, confidentiality, and data ethics, ensuring data is used only for its intended and proportionate purpose. Sixth and the last, fragmented or disproportionate investment should be avoided by linking CRBS digitalization to health sector automation and aligning CRBS digital strategies with the National Digital Framework for interoperability and cost-effective systems. To conclude, let me say this: digitalization can be a bridge or a barrier. The technology itself is neutral. It is the choices we make, the laws we update, the processes we simplify, the costs we protect, the communities we listen to that determine whether a child moves closer to their right to identity or further away from it. We have 58 months left until 2030. That may be enough time to course correct, but not enough time to repeat old mistakes. If we anchor digitalization in human rights, co-design it with the people it is meant to serve, and protect families from unnecessary cost and legal hurdles, then digitalization becomes what it was meant to be: a tool for inclusion, dignity, and justice for every child. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to yell a little bit because I don't have a microphone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, or no thank you, for reminding us that we're hurtling towards 2030 and that we have less and less time available. So given that time is of the essence, finally, Iris Samaldi of ATD Carmon, you're also bringing children in, so please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for my movement. ATD Force World is an international human rights movement that works in partnership with individuals, families, and communities living in extreme poverty. For over 60 years, our mission has been to ensure that those whose rights are violated are not only heard, but are recognized as primary partners in shaping the policies that affect their lives. In today's digital age, digitalization can unintentionally exclude certain groups of children. Many children living in extreme poverty face a digital divide. Limited access to technology, internet connectivity, and digital literacy. Without these resources, the risk left behind in accessing basic civil registration systems and those essential services such as education. In recent years, ATD Force World has worked alongside families in Burkina Faso, Senegal, the Central African Republic, Tanzania, and the Philippines on the right to birth registration. Together, we have identified both systemic obstacles and the resilient strategies families use in the most difficult contexts, including children living on the streets, families who have lost everything to climate disasters, and those living in cemeteries. These obstacles include distance, as we said already, cost, even for something as small as a bus fare, lack of awareness or time, weaknesses in administrative system, or fear of maltreatment that prevents birth registration. For families living in extreme poverty, the immediate priority is often simply surviving day to day. To overcome these challenges, we have organized partnerships and awareness campaigns in different countries. For example, in Central African Republic, ATD Force World helps create an administrative document commission in 12 neighborhoods of Bangui. With the support of local family, the commission successfully registered more than 200 children. The commission collaborates with multiple partners, including families, the traditional birth attendants, local authorities, mayor, neighborhood chief, and the General Directorate of Civil Status and Civil Pol. At this point, I would like to invite you to listen to Christopher, a child from the Tapori Parliament in Bangui. He has been actively involved in awareness campaign, helping other children to register their births and demonstrating how children themselves can be agents of change.
Thank you very much. So, I guess you could say that's the eruption of reality in this discourse, lived experience. Thank you to all the panelists. I think I'm not forgetting anyone. And thank you for more or less respecting time allocated. We still have some time to discuss amongst ourselves, and perhaps there may be a question from online. But at this point, I'm opening the floor to anyone who would like to share their thoughts, ask the panelists questions, or simply sing a song. So anyone who's willing wishes to take it. So is there any second person who would like to take it?
Say that someone on the screen is putting up his hand, but we don't want him to see, just to type his question.
So if you didn't hear what Mia just whispered to me, whoever online would like to ask a question is please type it in so we can read it out here in this room. So that would be really helpful. Anybody else? If not, I would like to make a comment so I don't forget by the time I'm supposed to wrap up. I think there's so many elements that have been brought in, such a rich discussion. But at the same time, one of them sort of, maybe I wasn't paying attention. One of them escaped, I think, our focus. There is so much distrust on the parts of populations regarding anything normative coming out of governments. And there is something that has to be overcome for people and populations to join in on what is clearly, from our human rights perspective, a benefit to populations and children. So this disconnect really needs to be addressed in some way, and obviously more in some areas of the world than in others, but I would submit everywhere, whether it's north, south, east, or west, there's some serious issues regarding authorities coming in and digitalizing, even if it's well explained. So that's something I think we need to debate and think of moving forward. I certainly don't want to take the floor longer, so is the question typed in?
No, but you can ask that question to Bhaskar about safe digitalization.
So Bhaskar, did you hear my comment, and would you like to comment on the issue of creating trust?
Yeah. Can you hear
Please
me?
go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So safe digitalization has several elements, and safeguards should be embedded at all critical stages, right from notification to declaration to registration to certification to data transfer, archiving. So a couple of areas where we have seen data breaches, and that has really become a big cause of concern is, so when we use mobile devices for data transfer, how should we ensure that data doesn't land in hands of unauthorized entities, including mobile service providers? So one of the recommendations that we very often provide is that data transfer should be fully encrypted. The second challenge that we have seen, because countries have started going for decentralized systems, mobile registration units. So in several instances, mobile devices got lost. And with this data was also, we couldn't retrieve data, countries couldn't retrieve data. So as a result of this, we started adding modules in case of lost or stolen devices, the data should be automatically deleted. The third element is how to have the confidence of users. You have data, but CRBS data is not public records. And I also highlighted in my intervention that you cannot use CRBS data to penalize clients. Unfortunately, this trend is catching up in most countries. They're using CRBS data to identify the age of mother. If a country doesn't prescribe, if they're really concerned about child marriage, and we have had some instances where mothers were penalized, then the data is also shared with immigration authorities. And as a result, you will see a lot of parents without legal residency permit, etc. They avoid coming for birth registration. So in a nutshell, data safety and safeguards are very, very critical. And as we digitalize the systems, I think we need to be more careful. We should pay more attention to it. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your remarks, which I think are crucial, and yet I still think that we need to think about this trust issue nonetheless. And I think one of you or several of you spoke about how participation is so important, that people should be incorporated in building systems. And yet we all know the divide between those who are at the end of algorithms and those that build algorithms. It's not a simple proposition. So let me take a question from online. It comes from Amit Sen, who works for UNHCR. Let me just read it out. How can we ensure digital identity management systems are inclusive of and safe for refugees in particular, recognizing that often they will not have lawful residency status and may be exposed to immigration penalties such as arrest, detention, deportation, whenever they approach national authorities. So that's a very poignant question. I'm turning to you, Helen, perhaps to start off, if that's okay with you. I'm sure you covered that.
I did, as you pointed out when I presented the report, there is a note tacked in there. So it is touched upon the inclusion of sort of refugee, migrant, and stateless populations. I think the core of it is removing the direct and indirect barriers. So, and there should be no barriers that exclude children, their parents, families from birth registration and no policy of practice. And this is based on the child of the parental caregivers, age, gender, ethnicity, religion, language, migration status, economic or other. So we need to have a system that's documented and deterred from access to systems. And you if they don't trust the system, they're not going to be able to register. So there's also the report really sets out the need for legal and policy reform in this regard. It makes it very clear point for making inclusive systems. But I think I'll stop there and pass on to anybody else who wishes to take the floor.
So I will, thank you, Helen. I will, unless one of the panelists wants to jump in. Yes.
Yeah, I think that the birth certificate for refugees and migrants should be universal, as is in the population. I mean, we don't have to be the difference. That's why it's so important the positive language about migrants and refugees. Otherwise, there is it's not only discrimination with birth certificate, but other the right to work, the right to education. We have to consider in our public policies aware campaigns that the birth certification and discrimination is universal rights. This is the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you. This notion of discrimination is also at the core. I have one more question from the floor, from online, the online floor. It comes from Peter Josias, who's runs an NGO called Digital Child Rights Foundation, based in the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken. Children also have the digital right on a safe online identity, privacy by design, age-appropriate age verification. What is the opinion of the panel with regard to what we have to do to accelerate, I guess, the general idea of digital rights in a safe online identity. So does anyone feel comfortable answering the question over the floor? I can say you should implement General Comment 25 of the Committee on the Rights of the Child on children's rights and the digital environment. Do you want to come in also?
I think, Philip, that was what I was going to say as well, but also to highlight that the Office of the High Commissioner also has a mandate this year to hold consultations, regional consultations on the looking at the framework for child safety online. So those at the end of the year, and there are 5 consultations, I believe 4 online and 1 in person. So if there's any interest in that, you can get in touch with me and I'll connect you with them.
Another opportunity. Oh, you want to add something?
Yes.
I have a question for you. Please go ahead.
Okay. It's very important. Child-specific data, privacy support, aligning with national and international standards. Like, for example, in South Africa, we have what they call freedom. So it's very important to state to show and
Yeah, opportunity to, yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Roberta Cecchetti and I'm on behalf of Family for Every Child, which is this network alliance of 57 CSOs from 42 countries around the world. They're working with children for them to live and grow in their own families in whichever form they exist. And I was just last week in Guatemala and they're piloting there a digital app for midwives to register children at birth in very remote areas and communities. And this point that Philip, you were making about trust in pre-existing system was a very key outcome of the evaluation that they did, because they exposed midwives that are very respected in the communities to play a role that is representing the central government. And when the central government has difficulties in reaching these communities that do not provide those systems, then the role of those who provide systems and become the voice and presence of a central state that is underperforming creates real barriers. So digitalization can be a tool as long as it doesn't come alone as a solution, but it is really accompanied by a whole series of capacities and systems and services that respond really to the need, right? So, excluded populations do not register children because they do not want to register still children, but there are serious barriers that are, economic barriers. The magic ballot of digitalization should, really not be overestimated, but accompaniment and building trust is really something that, including by the community and from the community themselves. So, reiterating what you were saying, thank you.
So thank you very much, Roberta. I think as a tidbit aside, the fact that you mentioned midwives is really important, because midwives historically have been link around secrecy and confidentiality regarding birth and all the circumstances. And so, in particular, I mean, I find it interesting that you pick up on this particular professional group. So, we've been very efficient. We've come up with a lot of thoughts. And so before I close with less than 2 sentences, I would like to give each panelist, I'm not going to say 1 minute, no, not anymore, 1 minute, not 1 minute, 60 seconds to share your last thoughts. And so we start with you, Excellency,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
Well, there are so much as I repeat that Roberta has already said. The digitalization is a tool. It's not a solution. And we need integral solution, and we need more of political awareness. We have to strengthen the awareness about the birth certificate and the policy and develop policy, and work hand in hand with the local community. It's very important, and try to create ownership about the important.
Thank you so much. Now, sorry.
Justice, family protection, and social protection.
Thank you so much. Helen, please.
I think the pathway is clear. You need to reform laws and policies, remove discriminatory barriers, make access free, simple, and close to where children and their families live. Integrate the services across the life cycle in a rights respecting way, safeguard human rights in every digital step, and keep registration going, particularly in emergency.
Okay.
So with this child rights-based approach, universal birth registration is within reach, and every child can be seen, protected, and realize their rights.
That was less than 60 seconds.
So, for us, we'd like to recommend the states to make it possible to train nurses and midwives, because we are working already in several places with the midwives. So it's the same that Roberta said. And then also something that we think will work very good to go, I mean, in the community, is to provide mobile services through vans or cars that can circulate among the rural villages, and to be in contact with the chief of the villages, because the chief of the villages, of course, have a great power and a great trust of the people. And this comes so this concept of the trust is really key to achieve this universal registration.
Thank you, Elise. Oscar, would you like to come in with your final thoughts?
Yeah.
Not final, but some thoughts.
Yeah. So from my side, I will reiterate the importance of making a distinction between digital solutions being the magic bullet and vis-a-vis what it can do on the ground. We should always remember that digitalization is just an enabler. It can reduce your gestation period. It can act as a force multiplier, but it cannot replace a system. And if your system happens to be super complicated, cumbersome, involves multiple visits to civil registration office. And if you don't simplify that, then I don't think digitalization will help you. Rather, it will create more problems. So I will conclude by saying that legal reviews and simplification of business process should be non-negotiable prerequisites before we embark on the journey of digitalization. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have one more thing to do before we have coffee and snacks next door, which is a short video. With that. Digitalization. Here we go.
And say. Is my screen?
I thought you guys.
The video of Makita with, she's also a temporary parliament member, so she works with Christopher, and they are very near to children living in the streets. They really do the job. Hope.
So, excellent. And so I was very impolite. I cut off one of the members of the panel. Please, let's hit the coffee and we can continue our discussion. There's another side event going on at 10:15. You're welcome to stay. There'll be even better coffee and snacks afterwards. And let me just end with a simple statement. It seems that birth registration is, and registration in general is such a no-brainer, yet it is not as straightforward as we would like it to be. So we still have a lot of work to do. So with that, thank you very much, and off to coffee and drinks and more discussion.